Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome very much. This is a seminar hosted by the Arab International Women's Forum, and I'm delighted to have a World Bank team here today presenting on digital agriculture. And let me start by saying my name is Julian Lampietti. I manage the Global Engagement Unit at the World Bank. And a couple of years ago, I was working in MENA, and I encountered this incredible force of nature known as Haifa, who was relentlessly pursuing the World Bank to do the right thing in terms of bringing digital technology and women together to change how agriculture was being done in MENA. And she was truly relentless. And the World Bank is a big organization. And I can say she single-handedly moved it from point A to point B with that relentless pursuit of us doing the right thing. And I want to thank her for that. And I want to thank her for hosting this particular event. So today we're going to talk about this digital technology. And at the heart of it, our biggest challenge is how do we connect the 600 million farms in the world with the 8 billion consumers. And the number of consumers is just going to grow. And this is a massive exchange of information that's going to take place. And digital technology can play a key role. And the bank's role in this is really about figuring out where the right public policies are to support the private sector to innovate and to do all sorts of really, really interesting things. I'm really delighted that PepsiCo is joining us in this presentation. Now, we're going to listen to our speakers, and this is going to be a very vibrant discussion. And I would just ask you to remember throughout this that today, our food system is costing us more than it's producing in economic terms. So the planet is feeding its 8 billion people, but the environmental, social, poverty, and health costs are rising more rapidly than the benefits we're getting from this food. And these digital technologies are an opportunity to bend the arc so that we can do great things with our agriculture and our food system. And finally, let me end on the following note. The Middle East region is where agriculture started in this world. It is also one of the most amazing food cultures of the world. And those two things will put it at the forefront of how we change the system and bend the arc going forward. Thank you very much. And Haifa, over to you. You're still on mute, Haifa. Haifa, you need to unmute. Perfect. Okay. I can hear you now.
Thank you. Thank you. Just give me a second, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Forgive me a moment. Okay, no worries. Thank you again, Julian. I'm truly, truly humbled by your kind words, and it was a great, great pleasure to meet you in the Middle East when you were visiting a couple of years ago. And indeed, I am very, very proud of our partnership on with today's webinar. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is truly a great, great pleasure for me as president and founder of the Arab International Women's Forum to add my welcome to you all and to thank you for joining us today for this very important discussion on digital transformation of the agriculture system. This webinar, as you are aware, is held in partnership with the World Bank. It actually marks our first virtual event for this year, for 2021, in which the Arab International Women's Forum proudly celebrates its 20th anniversary. We are truly proud that we have enjoyed the partnership and support of the World Bank for the last 18 years. First, mainly on women's economic empowerment, with added focus the last 4 years on sustainability and economic, food and water security issues in the MENA region and globally. In planning today's webinar, we have worked very closely with the valued agriculture team at the World Bank, led by Julian Lampietti, practice manager of the Global Engagement Unit of the Agriculture and Food Practice at the World Bank. This session will examine how digital technologies are accelerating transformation in the agri-food system, the role of digital agriculture in improving inclusion, equity, and environmental sustainability in food systems, and the important role that governments, institutions, farming communities, and private sector play in promoting a sustainable future for agriculture that will really put people and planet first before profit. I am proud to be co-chairing this event today with Marianne Grosclaude, practice manager for agriculture and food MENA at the World Bank. Julian, Marianne, and I are all honored to welcome our very special guest speakers for today. Eugene Willemsen, CEO for Africa, Middle East, and South Asia at PepsiCo. Ghada Elabed, Senior Agriculture Economist at the World Bank. And Parmesh Shah, Global Lead for Digital Agriculture at the World Bank. I wish to take this opportunity to thank Eugene for his valued presence and participation with us today, and for sharing his key perspective on the role of the private sector in creating environmentally sustainable food systems. PepsiCo has been a partner and a benefactor supporter of AIWF since 2002. For PepsiCo, agriculture is the foundation of the food system, and it is at the root of PepsiCo's business. Eugene, we all commend your own personal dedication for PepsiCo's global initiatives towards making agriculture more resilient, more intelligent, and more inclusive, especially as regards women, youth, and marginalized communities. Today, we commend the World Bank Food and Agriculture Practice on the launch of the excellent What's Cooking report on digital transformation of agriculture, which has inspired our session, and we look forward to examining the key findings during our discussions today. Allow me first to say a few words on the Arab International Women's Forum, which is a non-profit, non-governmental development organization set up in 2001 to support the empowerment of women in the Arab region in all sectors, but always within an international perspective. In the 20 years since its inception, AIWF has steadfastly focused on women's economic empowerment, on job creation, on education, and importantly, sustainability. In 2001, we are guided by SDG agenda as a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity towards the realization of the global goals in 2030. Key among our programs for the MENA region are food security, water security, and sustainable agriculture, all closely related to Sustainable Development Goal number 2, to end hunger. achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote smart agriculture. The MENA region has, like many other regions in the world, faced significant economic and social concerns even prior to COVID. From the refugee crisis that has impacted the region, particularly Lebanon and Jordan, more than any other country, to climate change, to stagnant private sector growth, widespread youth unemployment, and persistent gender-based inequality. Today, these challenges have been exacerbated by the unprecedented coronavirus pandemic, which has left no aspect of our lives, our livelihoods, without being touched. In 2020 and across the Arab region, women and youth were disproportionately impacted by the economic and social effects of the coronavirus pandemic. This year, many of the challenges of 2020 are still dominating our economies, our communities, and our families as the pandemic continues to disrupt every corner of the globe. The impact of this disruption is yet unknown, and allow me to quote His Majesty King Abdullah in a recent statement he delivered at Davos in January, and I quote, "We have barely scratched the surface of its long-term humanitarian and economic implications," end of quote. Beyond jobs and unemployment, climate change is an escalating crisis that the region must face urgently and together. The pandemic has exacerbated a growing global poverty, and it has starkly highlighted the deeply entrenched vulnerabilities of a food insecure Arab world where millions are at risk of starvation. Now is the time to work collaboratively and collectively to successfully adopt sustainable digital agriculture solutions that have the power to create a revolution in our global food systems, improve resilience and security of food and water, empower and develop the human talent behind the systems and behind the technology, and ultimately put safeguards in place within our food systems that protect our planet from wasteful production and unsustainable agri-tech methods. An innovation-driven, digital by default approach to sustainable agriculture in the region will require multi-stakeholder dialogue and collaboration. It will require the endorsement and actions of governments, civil society, academia, industry, and above all, the farming communities. Such an approach could prove transformational to people, planet, and to prosperity. Here, allow me to share a very good example. A recent World Bank discussion which I attended, Women Leading the Way for Change, held in January, welcomed Dr. Ngozi Iweala, former Finance and Foreign Minister of Nigeria, former Managing Director at the World Bank, and recently the first woman and the first African to be appointed Director General of the World Trade Organization. Dr. Ngozi, who studied agriculture at MIT, she said, and she gave the following example, which I believe demonstrates perfectly well the power and potential of digital technology in our agri-food systems. While in office in Nigeria, Dr. Ngozi launched a digital agriculture initiative with a budget of $25 million. She said, she shared that day, the total support of gender, she had the support of a fully gender-friendly president of the Republic, and she worked in full collaboration with 6 ministries, including the Ministry of Work, Health and Agriculture, to implement the program, which was designed especially to incentivize actions beneficial to girls and to women. For women in agriculture, the program launched an electronic wallets scheme that employed female farmers with much needed access, and that empowered and supported female farmers with much needed access to buy better seeds and better fertilizer from suppliers close to home. The program resulted in a remarkable 2 million more female farmers now being included in Nigeria's agriculture sector. This is one example of many such initiatives that we could easily replicate in our MENA region. I look forward to hearing today of many more best practices of how we can engage more women in agriculture and for agriculture to become more sustainable, inclusive, and digital in the MENA and globally. It gives me great pleasure now to give the floor to my distinguished co-chair for this session, Marianne Grosclaude. I reiterate my warmest thanks to all our valued guest speakers, to all our valued participants from across the world who have joined us today, and I wish you all an engaging and insightful discussion. I thank you for your kind attention. Marianne, I pass over to you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you very much for these inspiring remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to partner today with the AIWF for this important conversation on the transformation of the agriculture and food system. And I would like to thank you and to welcome you all to this event today. While the findings of the What's Cooking report that will be presented draw from global experience, you will find that they are particularly relevant to the challenges that countries in the Middle East and North Africa region are facing as they strive to recover from the crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. And while they also try to address the long-standing challenges and issues that have been affecting the sustainability of the food systems in the region. I'm thinking in particular about jobs and the ability of the food systems to provide decent and gainful employment for young people, and also to provide economic opportunities for women in a region where women labor force participation is one of the lowest in the world. I'm also thinking about the need to place the agri-food sector on a more sustainable path as good soils and water are getting scarcer. And with population growth and climate change, these trends will further be exacerbated. Digital solutions hold great promises for this sector at a time when decision makers are looking for a more inclusive and greener path to recover from the crisis. And this is reflected in the interest we see in the region from governments, from academia, from the private sector, from farmers, from development partners, in working together on how we can foster that and accelerate that digital transformation. At the same time, it is fair to say that the uptake of digital solutions in the region and in the sector has been slower than expected. It is important for all of us to understand what are the factors and the constraints that are hindering the development and adoption of those technologies, and to ensure at the same time that they can provide solutions to address the existing gaps in access to services in underserved region, in bridging the digital gaps for vulnerable groups, for women, and also in fostering the competitiveness of the agri-food sector. In our recent work in the region, we have found that there are a number of factors at play and that are hindering the digital transformation. And those include the low awareness about digital technologies and their potential for the agriculture sector. In some countries, low interest from some public and private players in what digital solutions can bring. The mismatch between the language used by those who develop those technologies and that farmers understand. And last but not least, inadequate access to data and to finance. So achieving successful results will require users to have a better awareness and understanding of digital applications, and for digital applications to provide timely, customized, and localized solutions for farmers in the region. On our side, at the World Bank Group, We will continue our engagement with other partners to identify opportunities to accelerate this digital transformation. I would like to take this opportunity to mention a few of those initiatives, starting with the excellent work that is being done by the National Commission for Lebanese Women and the Ministry of Agriculture in Lebanon as they work to launch very soon a digital Ag for Her competition, which will aim to crowdsource initiatives, digital solutions to facilitate market access for women involved in the agri-food sector in Lebanon. And we very much hope that this is an initiative that can be replicated in other countries in the region. We've also had the pleasure to work with a number of partners on a new report that will be released very shortly on harnessing the power of digital transformation in the Mashrek countries. And I would like to mention a few of them, the American University of Beirut, and I think they are here today, the United Nations Economic and Social Commissions for Western Asia, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the Center for Mediterranean Integration in Marseille, the Hashemite University of Jordan, the University of Babylon in Iraq, and the Ministries of Agriculture in Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon. In Morocco, we are very proud to support the recently launched Green Generation Strategy that is being spearheaded by the Ministry of Agriculture through specific investments to promote youth and women employment through digital solutions. And looking forward, we are also thinking about new initiatives, including the possible development of a center of excellence on digital agriculture that could serve eventually the region. I look forward to a very rich and inspiring conversation today on how digital solutions can make the food systems globally and in MENA truly more sustainable and inclusive. And with this, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Ghada Elabed, who will lead us into the discussion with a presentation of the key findings of the report. Ghada, over to you.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm asking my colleague Teges to share the screen. While Teges is preparing the presentation. So good morning, everyone. And thank you, Madame Chair, for hosting this event and inviting me to speak about digital agriculture. Being from Tunisia, it's a great pleasure to present this work to fellow Arab women and others who are interested in our region. So let me start by providing a quick overview of the presentation of today. So this is a preview of a World Bank publication called What's Cooking? Digital Transformation of the Agri-Food System. This is a team effort that was largely coordinated by Julian. So I first want to specify that this publication is not going to be a detailed description of digital technologies in agriculture or a catalog of the different applications. Instead, what we really aim to do here is to show how the food system is changing really rapidly thanks to the development of a massive amount of digital technologies. Since we are the World Bank, we're also interested in learning about the role of the public sector to make sure that these changes have positive impacts in terms of equity, including on women, environmental sustainability, and efficiency. So at the end of the presentation, I will go over 7 key areas where we think policymakers should be focusing, and these would have huge impact on how the digital revolution will take place in the world and also in the MENA region. Finally, there are 4 messages which are consistent with what has been said already. The first is that despite the tragic losses of COVID-19, it created an opportunity to rethink about the food system and the role of digital technologies in this transformation. The second message is related to data and the importance of paying attention to the issue of misusing data ownership, control and security, which is particularly important when we think of smallholder farmers, female women who are usually disadvantaged. The third point is related to the role of the public sector and how it would accelerate the digital transformation of the system. And finally, we would go over briefly possibilities of how to close the gender gap in the use of digital technologies. And as Marianne said, let me say that while the scope of this report is global, it is not focused specifically on the MENA region. Some of the findings are of relevance to this region. Next slide, please, Tegest. Thank you. So the key question that we are trying to answer today is the following. Our food system really sustains the ever-growing population. It creates millions of jobs and is critical in achieving the sustainable development goals. But at the same time, it is not fit for purpose, as what Julian said, and it stresses the environment by generating up to 30% of greenhouse gases. And there is an overabundance of food, but at the same time, 820 million people are undernourished worldwide. So the key motivation behind this work is how can we do to reverse this trend and make the food system achieve its sustainable development objectives? And this is one of the most vexing challenges of our time. How can we deliver a food system that is a major source of greenhouse gas mitigation and adaptation, can produce good quality jobs and incomes for people, and also be a source of healthy people? Next slide, please. So addressing this challenge requires acknowledging two things about the food system. The first is that it's a very complex food system. The main challenge, as you probably know, is connecting almost 600 million people, farms, with close to 7.5 billion people and consumers like you and me. These farms are in turn connected to a multitude of actors, hundreds of thousands of upstream and downstream actors and markets. So upstream markets, for example, are seed producers, machinery producers, and downstream markets are foods, logistics, fruits and vegetables. So you can see that there is a lot of information involved in this process and many transactions that happen at every node of what we call the food supply chain. So a recent study from 2014 estimated that each farm in a developed country was producing 200,000 bits of data. And in 2050, it's estimated that this amount will increase by 20 times almost. So you can see the massive complexity of the food system today. And this is one of the reasons that has been holding it back and preventing it from achieving its objectives. Next slide, please. So the other key issues that need to be addressed in order to unlock the potential of the food system is what's called transaction costs and information asymmetry. As I said, it takes thousands of stakeholders to make transactions to bring the food that was produced on farm to our plates. These transaction costs are throughout the food system, and they are incurred by farmers, for example, when they are looking for business partners, when they are trying to find each other, make deals, and also ensure that they are enforced. So for example, if you are a farmer and want to produce extra virgin olive oil, you need to decide on the tree variety to use, how to harvest your crop, how to transport it to a processing facility, where and how to sell it. So these decisions all involve transaction costs, which ultimately will reduce the profit of farmers and drive them to choose, and many times, quantity over quality, often at the expense of the environment. And this will also affect producer choices, consumer choices, sorry. So if we think again about the magnitude of the problem that the food system is facing, it's really, we have close to 600 million farms and 7.5 billion consumers and extremely long value chain with multiple transaction costs. Next slide, please. So this is where digital technology is promising. It promises to reduce these transaction costs and to simplify this problem thanks to the ability to collect massive amount of information and process them and store them in new innovative ways that didn't exist before. So what's different about this revolution? As many of you know, there were several revolutions in agriculture throughout history. All of these revolutions started on the farm, and they all have one common characteristic, which is they focus on the technologies that improve the productivity only on farm. For example, the British Revolution started with the plow. The Green Revolution started with improved seeds and fertilizers. The difference with digital revolution is that it started at every point of the value chain. It started on farm, upstream, and downstream. So it's not only affected how things work on the farm, but also how things work upstream and downstream. So the main message here is that digital revolution is affecting the whole food system and not only on farm productivity. Next slide, please. So what we show in this book, and there is a lot of detail in the book, is that the digital technologies for agriculture can solve many of the classic issues that we encounter in the food system, like lack of access to markets, absent financial markets, etc. And we go over these issues in details in the publication. So one of the first key benefits of data and digital technologies is increasing market efficiencies in the value chain. So, for example, if we think about digital platforms, digital e-commerce platforms, where consumers can order their food and groceries just by clicking, these platforms are truly revolutionizing the agriculture and food sector. For example, in Tunisia, my home country, emerging e-commerce platforms like Jumia and a new startup like Intigo are dramatically changing the way consumers and producers interact. These platforms allow farmers to access multiple markets and obtain better prices for their production. Digital agriculture can also improve equity through the inclusion of smallholder farmers, women, and marginalized population. And you don't need internet to be able to use many of the digital applications. If you have a phone with basic capabilities, you can access advice on eco-extension applications, you can learn about the weather, and all these could help you catch up with older and more advantaged farms. Digital technology, we show, also have a potential to improve the environmental sustainability by reducing food waste, improving resource management, and also rewarding environmentally friendly practices. So these are all the benefits, but also it is important to recognize that there are also risks. There is a risk of lack of competition. You can imagine a digital platform that collects a lot of information on consumers like Amazon or other huge platforms, and it then becomes very difficult for new players to enter the market. This can be seen, for example, in the US in the 80s, where eight firms had more than doubled the share of the US food retail market that they control. And this increased market power is linked to the use of digital technologies. The second risk that emerges from the use of digital technologies is the digital divide. And why? It's because many people, including women and rural farmers and in rural areas, can't access the technologies or have sufficient internet and don't know how to use it. And there are also risks that emerge with the misuse of data. This is an important question. We all provide a lot of information when we sign up for mobile applications. This problem is even worse for farmers who have to provide both personal information and business information to platforms when they sign up for these services. And sometimes they are not aware of the conditions that are attached with these platforms. So the key question is, who control this data? What do they do with it? And do they obtain the proper consent from the users? Another challenge is what we call the rebound effect. This is something that happens when there is a risk of over-exploiting the natural resource base because of digital technologies. So in a region like MENA, where water is a very scarce resource, this could be a huge issue. We can think, for example, about drip irrigation and how with digital technology, this could be even a more precise technology that allows farmers to save water. So in theory, this is very good because it saves money, but saving more money would also have the risk of incentivizing overuse of water. So this is one risk that needs to be addressed. It's not a risk if there is a good policy in place to make sure that this does not happen. So next slide, please. So just in the report, we created maps that assess the mobile coverage in rural areas in many regions in every region of the globe. And we disaggregated this information by 2G, 3G, 4G network in rural areas. And as you see, in the Middle East and North Africa region, there is a lot of heterogeneity in mobile coverage. We see that these are mostly concentrated in the coastal areas, but the coverage level suggests that there is potential for digital technology development in this region. Next slide, please. So here, the fundamental question that we are asking is how can the public sector ensure that the food system benefits from this digital revolution, and how can we mitigate the risks that we just described? And to do this, we designed a three-layered framework. We think that the first foundational enablers are important. We call them the non-digital enablers. And these are basically the infrastructure, basic roads, etc., that are crucial to make sure that the digital revolution reaches its potential. And here, digital technologies like satellite imagery, GIS, can help guide where, how much to invest in these non-digital enablers. The second pillar of this pyramid is the digital infrastructure. So this consists of phones, internet networks that would allow the use of digital technologies. This is a purely private good. This is something that the private sector should provide, but in many cases, especially in remote areas where it's very expensive for the private sector to provide these services, it makes sense for the public sector to also provide these services. The third enabler is open data and also the digital skills that are required to use this data. And here we argue in the report that policies need to support innovative and innovation ecosystems for digital agriculture through open datasets, digital platforms, entrepreneurship, digital payment systems, and digital skills. So I will spend the next 7 slides talking about these different aspects. Next slide, please. So the first recommendation is to strengthen access to foundational data and promote data sharing. So let's think, for example, about agriculture insurance. Traditionally, farmers, especially smallholder farmers and female farmers, are excluded from insurance markets because they are small, isolated, in rural areas. And so, but with digital revolution, with the access to freely available satellite data, many entrepreneurs developed apps that are very innovative to design products that are really tailored to the needs of these smallholder farmers. And they are affordable and they suit their needs. For example, World Cover is an insurance provider in Ghana that use freely available satellite data to monitor rainfall levels and trigger automatic payouts. So these type of innovations are only possible thanks to the access to open datasets. Next slide. So as I said earlier, it is very important to ensure data privacy, ownership, and security, especially in populations that are not well, don't have a high level of education, are isolated and not aware of their right. And this is still an ongoing issue in even developed countries in the US and Europe, but probably the Europeans are more advanced in this area and could be an example to follow in terms of how they are approaching these issues. And these issues of data privacy become more important when we think of the value of data. If I sign up for a digital platform to sell my products, my data is probably not worth too much. But if all the people in my village and in the country sign up to this platform, this information will have a lot of value for digital platform providers, and That's where this issue becomes critical. Next slide. So the third recommendation is to review regulation that constrain the use of technologies that enable precision agriculture. So a good example is the use of drones, and this technology is not allowed in many Arabic countries. And sometimes when it is authorized, you need more than 4 authorizations to use this technology. This is a missed opportunity because drones allow farmers to control their fields, know when pests are going to occur, monitor different problems, and ultimately improve their profitability and their incomes. So it would be good to review these regulations or add more flexibility in the use of these technologies. Next slide. The fourth recommendation is to ensure competition in digital markets and avoid market concentration. So here the one possibility is to use the classic tools of antitrust regulation and taxation, or also ensure that digital technologies and data standards are interoperable. For example, government can encourage interoperability between mobile operators, Orange and others, and financial institutions to make sure that smallholder farmers have better access to financial services. So in this context, interoperability means that mobile money operators can connect to each other and to the banking system, and there aren't any barriers to that. For smallholder farmers, for female smallholder farmers, this means that they can send their money across mobile money networks to a saving account and not worrying about what is the mobile operator of their counterpart. Next slide, please. The fifth recommendation is foundational, which is to enable a digital payment system. So these systems are essential for every transaction in this digital food system, because they reduce the transaction cost of between different actors, and they are only successful if digital payments are trusted and that the actors have trust in these platforms. Also, we need consumer protection frameworks, robust digital networks, and banking and telecom policies to support this digital payment system. Next, sorry, next slide. So the sixth recommendation is really about scaling up the innovation ecosystem. So digital entrepreneurship is the key driver behind the increased supply of digital solutions in the agri-food system. All the innovations, the apps that we see now are developed by entrepreneurs. But this is not possible without a good surrounding ecosystem. And here government have a very important role in encouraging this type of innovation, especially at the startup phase. And government, including the World Bank, are increasingly supporting innovation through innovation challenges to solve pressing questions, for example, that are linked to a specific issue. They can choose a key challenge, for example, organize an innovation challenge, attract the brightest entrepreneurs, and incentivize them to find solutions to these challenges. And my colleague Parmesh Shah has a lot of experience in this, and he could share his experience with the Million Farmer platform later. So next slide. So seventh recommendation is to invest in foundational research and development. This is a basic Hegelian role of the government. The public sector need to finance foundational research and development. And this has been shown to have a huge return on investment, especially in agriculture. And this is extremely important because many of the applications, for example, the e-extension application on how to treat your animals or crops, they rely on a lot of foundational research that was produced in public institutions. So scaling up funding for these type of institutions is important to generate more innovation. Next slide, please. So policymakers also need to think about how to make these digital technologies equitable by protecting the marginalized population from overexploitation, providing access to technology to these marginalized people, and paying special attention to the opportunities of women and girls and other disadvantaged population. Next slide. Thank you. So preventing the digital divide between men and women in the MENA region is critical. There is a gender gap in mobile internet use, as shown in this graph by the GSMA. Based on their most recent data, men are 20% more likely to be online than women in this region, which means that closing this gap is essential. Being offline now, especially in the agriculture sector, means being excluded from valuable services like inputs, output markets, and this digital divide could widen the existing gender inequalities, pushing women, especially female farmers, further into poverty. So what can be done to close this gap? Based on our review of the global experience, there are several ways to address this gap. One of them is to design programs that are specifically targeting women. For example, in Bihar in India, a program aggregated female smallholder farmers and created an agricultural market platform where they linked these smallholder farmer organizations with the consumers. And this platform was enabled by digital technologies, and it was a huge success that could be replicated in other countries. Empowering female digital entrepreneurship is also another avenue for promoting the inclusion of women into digital agriculture. And here, several forms of financial and technical support could be considered, like networking, exposure to role models, etc. And there are examples. For example, in Egypt, the project supported women and provided targeted trainings and skill development for them to achieve high success in digital entrepreneurship. Another approach is to support networks of women leaders in e-commerce and in different development regions. And this has been done by several donors and has been supported, for example, in Africa through the African Women Agribusiness Network. This network provided a platform for women entrepreneurs to meet, innovate, identify the need of female smallholder farmers, which are different from the needs of men or other type of farmers. And this way they generated innovative ideas to solve the most pressing challenges that they face. With that, I want to finish the presentation. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion. Over to you, Marianne.
Thank you very much, Ghada, for an excellent preview of the upcoming report that highlighted very well the very broad range of solutions that the digital transformation brings to the agri-food sector, but also the note of caution on the risks that will need to be mitigated. And I'm going to turn now to our first panelist today to get some reactions to the report and also some perspectives on the digital transformation in the food system. Dear Eugene, we're very delighted to have you with us today and to hear your perspective on what the digital transformation means for the agri-food sector. And I was wondering to start if you could give us a brief overview of what PepsiCo has been doing in terms of sustainable agriculture.
Absolutely, Marianne. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you today. And before I address your question, I also would like to recognize our appreciation and long-lasting partnership with the AIWF and specifically with Dr. Haifa Kaylani. And thank you for approaching me to be part of this discussion. I very much look forward to it because it's a topic that is not only close to my heart, but is also at the core of PepsiCo's sustainability strategy. Agriculture is one of the 6 key planks, and we believe that as one of the leading food and beverage companies, we actually have an opportunity to help transform the food system and also help transform how food is grown, produced, consumed, and ultimately being disposed of. And we take that responsibility not lightly. And I think there is a couple of key points that I'd like to highlight before we get into the Q&A. So if you look at our footprint globally, we work with about 100,000 farmers across the world. And of course, that ranges from large-scale commercial farmers to very small farmers. And I personally had the privilege to visit a few of our very small farmers in India, West Bengal, And if you look at how we work with, especially those smallholder farmers, I think it's really bringing the best of technology to those smallholder farmers to help enable them to improve the yields, improve their livelihoods. And the way that we do that is obviously supporting them with some digital tools. So we have a tool which is called Smart Agro, which gives us collectively insight all the way from sowing to harvesting and how the crop evolves, but also gives us opportunities to reduce, for instance, the use of water, which was one of the things, the Ghada, that you referenced. We also, in many instances, use drip irrigation, which again I think is a great tool for us to reduce the consumption of water in agriculture. And in some instances, we can actually couple that also with kind of smart sensors that really provide us with the information required to have the right amount of water being put to a certain crop in order to maximize the yield, but also minimize the use of water. Now, if you look at some of the partnerships that we have, for instance, in the MENA region, one of the partnerships that we're extremely proud of is a partnership in Egypt that we have with the CARE organization. So together we touch roughly 10,000 smallholder farmers, and these are primarily female farmers. And in this partnership that now is a partnership that we have for a couple of years, we have been able, through our capability, but also through technology that we put in, as well as leveraging best practices to improve the yields for these smallholder farmers by up to 40%. So that is a very significant improvement that obviously has a tremendous impact on the livelihoods of these smallholder farmers that in most cases, as I said, are female farmers. Then the use of technology, I think for us is still at the, I wouldn't say at the beginning, but there's so much more that we can do with the technology, digital technology, which is obviously benchmarking. And one of the ways that we actually want to roll out more of the benchmarking best practices is through demonstration farms. So globally, we now have about 230 demonstration farms, of which 50 in the region that I'm responsible for, which is Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. And in these demonstration farms, we work together with what we call progressive farmers. So farmers that really want to deploy the latest technology and really also can serve as a spokesperson for the broader farming community. And for instance, in West Bengal, I visited a few of these demonstration farms, and it's really great to see how these farmers actually work together with their neighboring farmers, help them improve the practices, and with that also help them improve, again, yields and livelihoods. So these are just a couple of examples in terms of what we're doing at PepsiCo. Agriculture is at the core of ultimately what we're doing. As I said, we're touching about 100,000 farming communities globally, and in my part of the world, about 32,000. So pretty extensive footprint. And as I said, we've started deploying state-of-the-art digital tools in order to improve the livelihoods of our farmers.
Thank you very much, Eugene, for this very relevant examples of how you are using digital solutions, digital technologies in your work with farmers. I was wondering if you could comment on the findings of the report and give us a private sector perspective on those findings.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I think is pretty clear to everyone is that ultimately, in order to really make progress against some of the findings of the report, we need very strong public-private partnerships. And let me give you another example from South Africa, where we recently acquired a big foods business, and where we're in the process of developing what I think is a very, very meaningful public-private partnership, which is actually inspired by something that is already for 2 decades now very successful in my home country. So I'm from the Netherlands originally, and in the Netherlands, the University of Wageningen, which is one of the most renowned universities globally in the field of agri-science, started with what is called a food valley. So they coupled academia with kind of a couple of big food companies supported by the government. And then collectively, these big food companies also provided seed funds for a vibrant startup community. That now has been extended also deep into the farming community in the Netherlands and has led to, I think, some phenomenal successes. And so being a relatively small country, the Netherlands now is the second largest producer of agricultural goods globally. Now, if you then take that example and you then kind of export that to some other parts of the world, in South Africa, where you have on one side very successful large-scale farmers, but on the other side you have a need to include much more emerging farmers into the value chain. The question is, how can you do that in a meaningful way? And one of the things that we're now working on with a couple of other key stakeholders is to try to replicate, of course, within a South African context, food innovation valley, similar to something that has been created so successfully in the Netherlands. So linking the large food industry with one or two universities, collectively providing also some relevant seed funds for startups, but then most importantly extending that into the farming community and really helping drive an inclusion of emerging farmers into the value chain of these large food companies. And it's something that I'm personally working on with a couple of other stakeholders, and pretty hopeful that we can have a meaningful impact there, especially for these emerging farmers. Now, one other example, and we were talking about well, two things, I think. One was the gender inequality. Second one was financial inclusion. Another initiative that I'm personally involved in, which is being chaired, again, she's not Dutch, but she's the Queen of the Netherlands, Queen Maxima, and she chairs a financial inclusion project on behalf of the United Nations. And it's a couple of big companies that work together to drive financial inclusion. And we are one of two big consumer goods companies within that consortium. And what we are trying to do there is actually drive financial inclusion, again, specifically focused on small farmers, female farmers primarily, in Pakistan. And it's still a relatively small-scale project, so there's a few hundred that are being impacted. But again, I think the learnings from that pilot can be extended to other parts of my sector eventually, and hopefully can have an impact for many more farmers across Africa, Middle East, and South Asia.
Thank you very much for these really inspiring examples. Eugene, thinking about your experience, across regions in Africa, in South Asia, in the Middle East, any reflections on the role of the public sector and things that governments might do better or more of or less of as they try to promote a vibrant digital ecosystem in the agriculture and food sector?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So first of all, I think the role of government, of course, is to provide, in many cases, a regulatory framework. So I think, Ghada, you touched on some of the challenges that the regulatory framework might have in terms of being able to fully deploy the full benefits of a digital ecosystem. So I think trying to take away some of the regulation that actually prevents the full utilization of a digital ecosystem is one. Two is establish the infrastructure that enables the use of digital technology at scale. And of course, one of the key examples there is ensuring that there is a mobile network and ideally high-speed internet available across the country, also deep into rural areas of a certain country. Because that will really unlock the full potential of digital. Because I think, Ghada, you also referenced the use of mobile phones, smartphones, which today can give you so much functionality. And if you have that capability in rural parts of the country, then I think there is a tremendous opportunity to significantly improve the yields, the practices that farmers work with, and as such also on one side improve their income, on the other side reduce the impact that you have on the overall environment, whether it's through water usage, whether it's through use of less raw materials or less greenhouse gas emissions, as we've seen, for instance, in the pilot in Egypt.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with us. I'm going to turn now to our second panelist, Parmesh Shah, my colleague in the World Bank. And Parmesh, I don't know, here you are. You know, from where you sit in the bank, you have really a bird's eye view of what's happening across the globe in terms of the digital ecosystem in the agriculture and food sector. The presentation highlighted the importance of fostering an innovations ecosystem to encourage the development of innovation, digital technology, digital technologies to serve the needs of the food system. I was wondering if you could provide some examples from the MENA region or from other regions of the thriving agtech innovation ecosystems, and share your thoughts on what are the factors that enable those ecosystems to thrive.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and thanks to Arab International Women Forum for hosting this. I think personally, I feel that the MENA region is at the cusp of a digitally enabled food system revolution. The potential is the highest in the MENA region. From what I see from the global perspective, there are so many incubators and accelerators and agtech startups which have started emerging in MENA region. But I'll first talk about what we see globally and then draw some examples from the MENA region there. I think if you look at globally, first revolution which came in technology came in the fintech side. And we saw a lot of things happening in terms of fintech products which were available, which drove the e-commerce revolution and other kinds of revolution. It's more like a consumer-focused revolution. And now we see the fintech revolution going to agtech. And globally, we have now about 5,600 very innovative startups in the agriculture field who are working on precision agriculture, productivity, access to market, and financial inclusion and climate smart agriculture. So the change is that what Julian also said in the beginning, and Ghada also said, that it's not just on-farm. It's on-farm, off-farm, non-farm, e-commerce. All these kinds of innovations are now getting bundled to really allow farmers to make the full use of that. Personally, I feel that just the focus on production and productivity will not increase farmers' income. I think the models which we have seen work globally are the ones which integrate that. Now, I'll give you an example now from Kenya. We are working with million farmers who have been organized into producer organizations, aggregated, which include almost like half of them are women farmers. And what we did in Kenya was first to harvest all the innovations which were happening, all the startups. And we have now about 26 startups which were identified through this challenge. This is fostered by the government, various ministries of agriculture, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and county governments. And then after that innovation was done, then these 28 innovators are now working with million farmers to really do a proof of concept of these solutions. Now, I'll give you some example. The Kenyan farmers were never able to access the tractor services at the right time, in the mechanization services. They would mostly get access, particularly the smallholders will get access to tractors 15 days after the sowing date. So we have a company called Hello Tractor now Uberizing the whole mechanization space, where all the tractor drivers, tractor owners, and the people who need these services are on one digital platform. And you have lots of people accessing mechanization. So it's almost increased by 56%, mechanization services. And as a result, the productivity also increases quite significantly. The second thing is about soil testing was being done and the results were coming after 2 months and people are never able to use that. So now we have AgroCares, a company which really tests soil. Reports are available in 10 minutes. The reports go to all the fertilizer dealers who keep the fertilizer ready, and people can lift those fertilizers on the same day. And in some cases, smallholders are also being provided courier services in which fertilizers are delivered at their doorstep. Never thought of. We are very, in our urban situations, we have products being delivered to our house on call, but we don't see the same thing happening in case of small farmers where opportunity cost is very high. Similarly, on the markets, we have a lot of mango producers in Kenya now who are able to access the markets, agribusiness markets and the commodities, so that they're able to get 30 to 40% higher prices. Now, what is the role of private sector and the public sector here? The public sector really develops the data platform and also provides the incubation platform, and then the private sector comes and delivers lots of these things. You need a more enabling system to do that. So we find that if we invest in an innovation ecosystem, which allows startups, the private sector, and the public sector to come together, then we will see very transformational changes there. Now, coming back to MENA now, I think clearly what we see in MENA, we have about 69 very, very promising startups now in the MENA region, which are exactly doing very innovative things across the countries. We see that happening in, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Jordan, in Lebanon, and Morocco, and Tunisia. So we clearly see the hubs of where the young people are, coming and initiating lots of innovative startups. Now, what the governments and the World Bank have to do is to provide an enabling innovation system where we can incubate these ideas, and with IFC and others in our group, and then also provide an innovation ecosystem for these to be scaled up. The second major opportunity in MENA is that what I have seen is that we have a lot of women's collectives and cooperatives which are, developing, which are working in agriculture and food and all. I see a big cooperative in Morocco, which is now third millennial cooperative, which is really now trying to bring in 26 major cooperatives in Morocco, and to bring in all the data which they have on production is digitized, and then they are able to develop some kind of a market access platform using digital technologies. We have about 1,900 cooperatives in MENA region who are still working in a very old-fashioned way. So if we were able to digitize that data and bring in these innovative startups to work with these cooperatives, we will see a huge transformation there. The second issue is, which we have seen, is that Tarfin, a very innovative startup in Turkey, has been able to bring in the agriculture finance solutions, where they have developed a credit scoring model for very small holders, particularly women holders. And that credit scores are converted into a financial inclusion facility where microfinance institutions and lots of other banks are now providing financial data. So financial data, if it gets collected and credit scores are collected for a lot of women farmers and cooperatives, then in MENA region, you can see a very huge explosion of that. And Eugene also talked about what they are trying to do in Jordan on what they do with smallholders and all. Those models have started emerging. So I see clearly 4 areas where things will happen. One is the whole area of precision agriculture. And I would like to mention that MENA region is now doing very innovative work on vertical indoor farms, which are more like controlled environment agriculture. They are working on combining hydroponics and aquaculture. And Dr. Amira Tenaji is really leading a very interesting innovation in integrated farming on hydroponics and all in UAE. And now she's taking that approach to many other women farmers and women entrepreneurs there. So I think this controlled economic, controlled enabled agriculture, where what Eugene was also talking about, this food valley kind of a concept, which is like a smart food valley where lots of women entrepreneurs are, establishing greenhouses and controlled environment agriculture, could also become a very interesting thing, because I think this is very important on terms of fruits and other kinds of things. And we have another innovator, Shireen Subial, who is doing something similar in Kuwait. And she is now doing a very interesting model on aquaculture also in the same way. So we have already emergence of the first generation startups in MENA region led by women agtech entrepreneurs. And we need to bring all of them into an incubator where we can really support these emerging women entrepreneurs to really take this model to the rest of the MENA region, basically. So I would say that I think we only have 68 startups in MENA region which have the potential to get scaled up, and only about 6 or 7 of them are led by women. So I think we have to provide a top class kind of incubator for women farmers so that they can try ideas, take some risk, do some piloting, and then probably provide a financing facility which allows us to scale that up. I'll stop, Marianne, at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Parmesh, and thank you for also bringing the gender dimension in this conversation. I was wondering if you could share some lessons of what has worked in terms of further engaging women in this initiative. I think it's a very important question in the MENA region.
So I think 2 things which are very important. On one side, we have to work with women farmers. And really, when we were looking at the Jordan project, I was surprised to know that 70% of the agriculture engineers are women in Jordan. But yet they continue to work at a very lower level in terms of, first level jobs. But we have never taken these 70% women and really provided them incubation to think big and to do things differently. So let me come back again. I think first is we need to work with women's collectives and producer organizations. That's the model which has worked globally. If you digitize the data and you provide lots of first level extension services and all, it doesn't have to be only mobile. It is also the, what we call is an IVR technology, in which women get a lot of messages on their phones and, they can talk to someone and then, look at that. Then there's a lot of videos which they can watch. Also, it's not necessary, it doesn't have to be using only the mobile apps, but there are a range of technologies which are possible there. This is what we have done in many other countries in India and Southeast Asia and all, where women who really were only educated up to standard 6th are now dealing with commodity exchanges and selling their maize there. But it has happened after a tremendous amount of mobilization on that. The second part would be to really take women agri-tech and fintech entrepreneurs and really creating a new ecosystem of supporting them. And I personally feel that IFC, the World Bank, and probably the Pepsi, we have to come together at some place to really support these women entrepreneurs there. And that's what we see now. In other countries where we in Kenya, we are now supporting a lot of women agtech entrepreneurs, like DigiCow is a very, very innovative enterprise where DigiCow is led by 3 women founders, and they have now bought all the women who own cattle on one digital platform to get those services and to be able to sell their meat together. So I think a combination of working with women farmers on one side and really working with women's collectives on one side, and then working with women entrepreneurs, and then in between, we also need to work with the skill part. The skill is very important. So I think providing digital skills, and really improving the skills of the women to be able to use digital tools. We need to invest in the human capital part there as well. Those are some of my thoughts at this stage, Marianne.
Thank you very much, Parmesh, and all very relevant to the MENA region. We have about 15 minutes left, and I will now open the floor for the Q&A part of our webinar. So I would like to invite you, if you would like to come in, to send me a note on the chat. And I see that we already have a question that has come in from Rinmeshtabi at ESCOA about sharing experiences that show how to take those initiatives that you have mentioned, Eugene, Parmesh, and also Ghada in your presentation, how to take those pilot and those initiatives to scale. I don't know if any of you would like to come in and reflect on that.
Happy to take the question, Marianne. So first of all, most of the things we're doing. Sorry, I think that's someone. We have some background noise. Yeah.
Everyone, please remember to mute.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, most of the things that we do at scale. So we work with, as I said, 32,000 farmers just within the AMESA division. And if you look at India alone, we have about 20,000 farmers that we work with in India. Now, just then maybe to an example of what is a pilot. So in West Bengal, we have a pilot also in partnership with USAID, specifically focused on female farmers, where we provide tools, we provide also the education for them to be successful farmers, and that is further supported by USAID. Last year, we started with 500 farmers. This year, we had another 1,500 farmers. So combined, that is already 2,000 female farmers that in West Bengal are being supported with this initiative. And after 1 year, we'll be able to really be self-sufficient with their relatively small farming operation and are a supplier to us. So that is an example of where you can see that, yes, we start with a pilot, we get some learnings, and then we're able to scale it fairly quickly thereafter. But if you look at most of the relationships that we have in the AMESA division is with relatively small farmers. And those small farmers really benefit from all the capabilities and tools that we can support them with. In many cases, that is also inclusive of end-to-end digitization. And then on top of that, you have the demonstration farms that are available in most markets where we operate in AMESA that can help farmers learn from each other, can help them improve their practices, both to the benefit of their income as well as to the benefit of the planet in terms of reducing the use of resources. So I think we're, in that sense, a company that operates with a lot of agility, a lot of speed, a lot of focus, and with an ability also to quickly scale when we see that certain initiatives have the desired impact and success.
Thank you very much for sharing those insights. I see that we also have a couple of people who have indicated their interest to come in. So I have Sunil and then Mihai. Sunil, would you like to come in next? And I think you're on mute. Sunil, I think you're still on mute. We can't hear you.
Sunil Mulidhar Shastri, Director, Ocean Governance Limited, based in the UK. It's a great honor and pleasure to see Haifa again after such a long time, albeit virtually. Greetings to you, Haifa. And thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me and letting me ask the question. I have a broader question in the sense that agriculture contributes to the three biggest problems that are posing us today. Climate change is the smallest of them all, actually, although climate change is a big thing, but climate change is still the smaller one. The bigger one is a nitrogen loss of nitrogen cycle. And even bigger one is the loss of biodiversity loss. So those three are the biggest challenges that we have today. And given that much of farming, particularly in developing countries and in MENA region, I'm sure in Africa and other countries, is subsistence farming and small scale farming. How are we going to, I mean, I think Parmesh is shaking his head, so I may be wrong, but please, can you shed some light on that? And just a side point to that, I have a feeling that we live in a kind of we are leading to a lawless world in the sense that our land is becoming less productive, our air is becoming less breathable, and our water is becoming scarce and undrinkable. So again, all of those also contributed by agriculture and food, actually. So I just wanted to see how this conundrum can be. I mean, it's a big question, but I just wanted to get some views about this from you. Thank you very much. And thanks again for letting me ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil. And maybe Parmesh, would you like to provide some answers on digital solutions to this bigger question?
I think Sunil is raising the right questions, and Julian in his inaugural remarks said that food system is not fit for purpose at this stage. And the reason it's not fit for purpose and all the things which Sunil is referring to is because the information which is available to the smallholders on what they're doing with these problems is not really traveling to them or not traveling to others so that they can help them. So I think we feel that the biggest thing in this case is data. I think data is what leads to different kinds of solutions and actions. So on their own, digital solutions are not helpful unless and until we have a good data foundation on where the system is broken, where the biodiversity is already gone, what are the environmental variables there. So I think if we are able to develop what we call increasingly is a food system observatory all over there through data, then the solutions will come out of that. And wherever we have seen investments done in data, like in Morocco, the government is really going to invest in a data platform all across the country, which will have data on weather data, the food data, the supply data, the production data. And once you look at the interplay of this data, then the solutions will come, which will be more holistic and will be able to solve these problems. So the solution, I'm not denying the problem, but the solution will come through a combination of data and then some kind of disruption in solutions. But digital allows us to disrupt. That's the most important thing. The other solutions are very steady state. So I would just say that I think food loss and waste, biodiversity, climate change, all these 3-4 problems are affecting the agriculture and food system quite significantly. And I think the more we are able to use data and digital technologies, we think we are going to find solutions in those spaces. That's my sort of short answer to that.
Thank you very much, Parmesh.
Thank you.
We have a couple of other questions from participants. We have a question from Mireille in Lebanon about responsibilities for monitoring the integrity and practicability of those digital initiatives. And we also have a question from Lufik about asking whether the panelists could shed share their experience with the importance of technical training needs and skills and education, and how the public and private sector can work together in that respect.
So
maybe Julian and Ghada can also answer questions because they are part of the panel as well.
Okay, we'll start with Eugene and then we'll go to Ghada.
So, sorry, I didn't want to cut anyone off. So, Haifa, if you want to go first, please go first.
Go ahead, Eugene, please.
Okay. So just on the topic of education and skills training, that obviously is critical, and it's not just digital skills that people need to acquire. It's broader, farming skills, and I would say that we have a comprehensive playbook that we roll out with smallholder farmers. to help them acquire the necessary skills, whether it's the more basic farming skills or whether it's some of the digital skills that will help them become better farmers. And we have an agro team that is working with those farmers day in, day out in the fields. I think Eugene, who's leading the team in AMESA, is on the call with us as well. So he and his team actually provide that skills training to our farmers across AMESA.
Thank you very much. Ghada?
Thank you, Marianne. I actually wanted to come back to the question by Sunil and complement the answer of Parmesh, which I agree with. I also wanted to emphasize that the goal of the report is not to say that digital is the solution for everything. We recognize the limitation of digital and also acknowledge the importance of the policy framework to avoid the problem that you mentioned of soil depletion, azote loss. We need to really think about the policy framework, the agriculture policy framework, and provide the right incentives for farmers to adopt these technologies. These would be enabled by digital technologies, but it will not be the only solution. And our team at the World Bank, we are providing support to countries to go over this framework of agriculture policies and assess how we can make sure that they are aligned with the objectives of the food system of improving these objectives that you mentioned. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ghada. And I don't know, Julian or Parmesh, if you also wanted to come in on those last points. If not, I think we are reaching the end of our time. I'm sure there's many more questions and we could continue this conversation for another couple of hours. I think it's just the beginning of a conversation. So I would like to, I see someone raising their hand, and I'm not sure we'll have time to take on more questions right now. But I would like to, use the 2 minutes that are left to thank you very much all for a very, very rich webinar. I understand that the report will be available digitally to everyone on March 18th. We will have a formal launch then. We will also make sure that the presentation today is available to all participants. And as I said, it's just the beginning of a conversation. And dear Haifa, thank you very much for hosting this webinar today. We look very much forward to the continuation of our partnership on this very important topic. And maybe I will give you the floor to conclude and close.
Thank you, Marianne. I would like really to thank, on all our behalf, deep thanks to you, Marianne, my co-chair today, in leading this excellent session. We have all been enriched, and thank you for Julian, for being behind it all, really. Ghada, I compliment you as being one of the authors of an excellent report that we look forward to reading and rereading and implementing on the ground and ensuring it is happening in the MENA and globally. And Parmesh, thank you so much for your valued input also on the role of women in agriculture, and you've given us a perspective. Eugene, I cannot thank you enough for coming in from different perspectives, the role of PepsiCo as well as farming and what you're doing in farming and your own care on sustainability. And what I would like, I'm a great believer in getting things done. And amongst the things that I would strongly recommend that we take away from today's meeting is bring together the recommendations in this report with and the work of the World Bank to supporting women in agriculture. And I love the idea of the Center of Excellence that was mentioned earlier in the conversation and the discussion today, to bring that Center of Excellence for Women in Agriculture, that we can bring our forces together, PepsiCo, the World Bank, the Arab International Women's Forum, and all our distinguished guests and participants who are today representing governments and academia and civil society. I think it is very important to get this done, and we avail ourselves in the Arab International Women's Forum in helping you all lead with this. We are great believers in the role of women in all sectors, and certainly we are all aware that women have been the highest, the most, the hardest working in the rural sector. And often the work is not well recognized. I think it's time to recognize, empower, digitize, and bring them into the picture more and more. Thank you all, and we look forward to delivering on the outcomes of the report, working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Haifa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marianne, again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Ghada, Eugene, thank you. Julian.
Thank you, Haifa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.